In this video, we will look into scopes of a particular variable. Let us define a function called, let's call it foo, and then this function foo has a variable called x, which is assigned to a value 1. And if we try to print this variable, that is, if you're trying to access this variable x outside the function, it won't work. It will show you a name error saying that name x is not defined. And if you define a variable, the same variable x, outside of this function, x equal to 3, let's say, it will print the value 3. And if this variable is defined after the function, it will print the value 3, right? So if you print, if this print statement is if it is inside the function, you can see, just a second, I need to call this function. So print of, just foo is enough. Okay, so if I call the function and the print statement is inside the function, you will see that the value 1 is printed over here. So what is happening here is, any variable that you define inside a function can only be accessed within a function. You can't access it outside the function. So that is why it was throwing error when you're trying to print the variable x. Okay, so this is what we call as a local scope. So what does a local scope means is, when there's a function, okay, when there's a function, you define variable or you define any new function inside another function. These things can only be accessed within the function. You can't access them outside of it. Now let me modify this code a little bit. If I define a variable x equal to 4 outside the function, and I try to access this variable inside the function foo by printing the variable x, okay, and I need to call this function now. If I call the function now, you can see that the value 4 is printed, but I'm accessing the variable x, which is outside this function. You can do that because we say here x is in global scope. So what that means is, any variable, anything that is defined outside a particular function can be accessed within the function, but you can't do the otherwise. You can't define x is equal to 4 here and then try to access this. uh, One second, you can't try to access 4 without calling it. So you can't print x, right? So that is local scope. This is in local scope. X is equal to 4 is in local scope, and if you define x is equal to 5 or anything here, this variable x is in global scope. Okay, now let me call this function. Okay, there are two x's defined here, x equal to 5, which is outside the function, and x equal to 4, which is inside the function. Now if I call the function foo, okay, I'm trying to print the variable x. So if I call the function foo, 4 is printed. Okay, this value 4 is printed, and not 5 is not printed. If this is not there, and then I still try to print x, you can see 5 is printed. So now the confusion is, how does Python know which x to access? So to solve that, what the Python interpreter thinks in this way. First, it will check whether the particular variable x is defined inside the function. If it is defined inside the function, it will access it. If it is not defined, it will go to the global scope, and then it will check over there. So if it is there, it will print the value over there. Even if x is not there, let's say if this is not here and this is not here, it will simply throw you an error saying name error, because there is no x defined in any of the scopes, not even in the local scope, not even in the global scope. Okay, so the convention is simple. So when you're trying to access a variable x, first it will look inside the local scope. If it is not there, it will look inside the global scope. This is briefly how scopes work in Python. Well, if you want to see what kind of variables are defined in global scope, let's say you have x is equal to 4, and then you have a y is equal to 5, and then z is equal to 6. 6. And then you also have a function, say define foo, which is, let's give this simple function pass. What this pass is doing is, it won't execute it. It will just run the function, and there is nothing inside the function. Okay, if I print, there is a special function that is defined in Python called globals. if you call that function, right, it will print all the variables that are defined in the global scope. Don't worry about these things, these are not very important to us. You can see over here x is 4, y is 5, z is 6, and foo is a function defined at something over here. What this means is this is a memory location. Okay, this is a memory location that is in your computer. It will vary depending on when you restart your computer or when you restart a program. And if and there's one more variable, one more function called locals. So if you define x is equal to 4, and then if you print this locals, okay, if you print that, one second, I need to call this function, you will see x is assigned with a value of 4, right? So this locals, if I'm let me just make it 9 and show it to you. You can see x is 9. So what this locals function will give you the variables that are there inside this particular foo inside this particular foo function. So if you print locals before the assignment of this x is equal to 9, you will see it is empty because x is equal to 9 is not read by the program yet. So you can access your locals or your globals using these two functions called globals and locals. So local and global, you can think of them as namespaces. That's the convention or terminology that we have in Python. So a local namespace is something that is very specific to a function, and a global namespace is global. It can be accessed by anything. Okay. Let me give you another example so that you can clearly understand how this locals thing work. Let me call a function define a random function. Okay, this random function has so many variables. X is equal to 1, y is equal to 2, z is equal to 4. Let that be also there. It's fine. If I print locals here, and then I call random function, you can see it is empty because when you execute, when this line is at this line, there is no variable that is seen by the interpreter. So whenever you call a function, it makes a separate namespace for the particular function call. So if you print locals after all those variables are defined, you will see them over here, right? Once the function call gets over, this locals variable, this local namespace will not exist. That will be deleted by the Python interpreter. Okay, so locals is something very specific to a function call. So each time you make a function call, a particular namespace is created for these variables. Once the function call is over, these are deleted. So this is the difference between locals and globals. And in global namespace, all the variables are defined all the time. Okay, that's it for today. Simple introduction to local scope and global scope in Python.